My daughter called me over the phone and said, "Don't come to my house again. I just gave birth and I don't want your poor self around my family." I was surprised, but I just said okay and moved on with my life. What happened next was rather unexpected. I will tell you everything. First, let me quickly thank you for your continuous support. This means a lot to us. If you enjoy the stories we share, kindly subscribe to this channel. It will be great if you can leave a comment on which city you are watching from. We might just give you a shout-out in our next story. Today's special shout-out goes to James Gray from New York. We are glad you enjoy our stories. Now let's go deeper into the story. I was in the garage, tinkering with the old radio that had stopped working again, when my phone buzzed on the workbench. The screen lit up with her name, Chidinma. I smiled before I even answered, wiping my hands on my shirt. I hadn't heard from her in a couple weeks, not since she gave birth. I figured she was just busy, settling in with the new baby. I'd been waiting patiently, hoping she'd call and say, "Daddy, come see your granddaughter." I was ready. Had already bought some small baby clothes from the market, packed them in a box. I even dug out my camera from the back of the closet, the one I used when she was little. I wanted to take pictures, start new memories. But the voice that met me wasn't the voice of my daughter. It was cold, calculated, detached in a way I'd never heard before. "Don't come to my house again," she said. No greeting, no preamble, just those sharp words, cutting clean. "I just gave birth, and I don't want your poor self around my family." I stood there, frozen, phone pressed to my ear, not sure I'd heard her right. My mind tried to fill in the blanks. Maybe she meant something else. Maybe she was tired or stressed or... Hell, maybe I was dreaming. But her voice was firm, dismissive, as if I were some stray dog nosing around her new life. I didn't say much, just murmured, "Okay," and hung up. My hands were shaking when I put the phone down. That was all it took. One call, 30 seconds, a lifetime of love undone by a few careless words. I didn't cry. I'm not even sure I knew how to anymore. But I sat on the edge of the workbench for a long time, staring at the floor. My ears were ringing. My chest felt hollow, like someone had scooped out everything inside me. It wasn't just what she said, it was how she said it. Like I was beneath her. Like the man who raised her on back-breaking construction jobs, who sold his only motorcycle so she could go to university, who patched her uniforms and ironed them with pride. That man meant nothing now. I stayed in that garage until the sun went down. Didn't bother finishing the radio. I walked back into the house, past the unopened box of baby clothes, and sat in the living room, lights off. The silence felt like judgment. I thought of her mother, gone 25 years now. She would have known what to say. She would have marched straight to that house and knocked some sense into her. But me? I just folded into myself. Maybe I deserved it. Maybe I'd failed her somewhere along the line. The next morning, I told everyone at the mechanic shop that the baby was fine, that they were just adjusting to new routines. I smiled when they clapped me on the back and said, "You're a grandfather now." I even bought a round of drinks that evening at the local bar. I lied through my teeth, not to protect her, but to protect me. The shame was mine. The embarrassment. My own daughter had made it clear I wasn't good enough to be in her new, polished world. And I couldn't bear the thought of people seeing that. 2 days passed. Then 5. Then 10. I kept waiting for her to call back. To apologize. To say she didn't mean it. But nothing came. No call. No message. Just that one sentence, echoing in my mind every night as I lay awake. "I don't want your poor self around my family." I started picking apart the past, wondering where things went wrong. Was it when she started dating that boy from the wealthy family? The one with the expensive car and the soft, foreign accent? Or was it when she landed her corporate job and stopped inviting me to her office parties? I had noticed the distance, but I never imagined she'd push me this far out. A week later, I tried to pray. I sat on my knees in the parlor, trying to talk to God the way I used to when she was sick as a child, when I was desperate for help. But the words wouldn't come. All I could say was her name. Over and over. Chidinma. My pride said to let her go. My heart wasn't so sure. I had raised her to be strong, not cruel. But maybe she had learned that cruelty from the world. Or maybe from me, in ways I didn't recognize at the time. I was still wrestling with it all when my neighbor, Paul, dropped by. He noticed the unopened gift box and asked if I'd met the baby yet. I told him no. He raised his eyebrows. Why not? I shrugged. She said she doesn't want me around. He stared at me, stunned. What the hell kind of daughter says that? I didn't answer. Paul sat down, shaking his head. You spent your whole life breaking your back for that girl. You're gonna let her talk to you like that? That night, his words kept playing in my head. You're gonna let her talk to you like that? I wasn't sure what else to do. I couldn't force her to respect me, but I could choose what I did with that pain. And for now, I decided to do what I'd always done. Keep quiet, keep moving, and stay out of her way. Until 2 weeks later, when she called again. But this time, she was crying. Her voice was trembling on the other end of the line. It was the same number she used before, but now it didn't carry the same arrogance. No steel in her tone, just fear, desperation. Daddy, please, the baby, she's very sick. The doctor said she needs a blood transfusion and no one else matches. We tested everyone. You're the only one left. I sat down slowly on the bed, phone pressed tight against my ear. My stomach turned. My heart was racing, but my mind had already gone cold. I didn't respond right away. I let her sob, let the panic spill out. I didn't interrupt. Not even when she started repeating my name like a chant, Daddy, please. Daddy, I'm sorry. Daddy, I didn't mean. I cut her off. Calmly, quietly. Send me the hospital address. I could hear her pause, unsure what that meant. Was it a yes? Was it forgiveness? It was neither. But I wasn't about to let a child die because her mother had made a fool out of me. I'll be there, I said, and hung up before she could say another word. The drive to the hospital took over an hour, but it felt like 3. The roads were quiet, but my mind was loud. I kept seeing her face as a baby, sleeping in the crook of my arm. I remembered her first fever, how I ran down the street barefoot to find a chemist in the middle of the night. I remembered the look in her eyes the first time she called me Daddy. And I remembered the sound of her voice just 2 weeks ago. Don't come to my house again. I pulled into the hospital parking lot just after midnight. The place looked sterile and expensive. One of those private facilities with marble floors and silent halls, where everyone spoke in low voices and wore polished shoes. I walked in wearing my work boots and my old jacket, the same one I'd worn every winter since she was in high school. The receptionist looked me up and down, hesitant, until I gave her my name. Then things moved quickly. A nurse escorted me down a long corridor, explaining procedures I wasn't really listening to. When I saw her, my daughter, sitting in the waiting area, her eyes swollen from crying, my feet nearly stopped moving. She looked up at me like she didn't know what to say. Her husband stood beside her, silent, hands shoved in his pockets. He didn't greet me, didn't offer a handshake, just a nod, like he was doing me a favor by acknowledging I existed. I didn't speak to him either. I walked right past both of them, toward the nurse leading the way. They took my blood quickly, efficiently. I didn't ask questions, didn't demand thanks. I stared at the wall while the needle went in, the red line creeping through the tube. Somewhere down the hall, I could hear a baby crying, a sharp, high-pitched wail that made my chest tighten. That's her, I thought. My granddaughter. I'd never held her. Never seen her face. And here I was, bleeding for her. Afterward, they gave me orange juice and a sandwich. I waved it off. I didn't want comfort. I wanted distance. I wanted to go home. But as I walked out of the recovery room, my daughter was waiting there. Alone. Her husband nowhere in sight. Daddy, she said quietly, reaching for my arm. I pulled back. No, her hand dropped. Please. I didn't mean what I said. I looked her dead in the eye. You meant every word. Don't insult us both by pretending you didn't. Tears welled up again. She looked so small then, smaller than I remembered. Like a child caught in the act, begging for forgiveness not out of remorse, but out of need. I was overwhelmed, she stammered. I said terrible things, but I was scared. I didn't want you to see me like that. Weak, messy, vulnerable. And you know how they are, my in-laws. I just wanted to. I raised a hand. Don't explain. I'm not here for you. I'm here for that baby. And only because she's innocent. She blinked hard. So that's it. You're just going to disown me. I stepped back. You already did that the moment you decided I wasn't good enough to be seen near your perfect little family. My voice broke slightly. I cleared my throat. You wanted distance. I gave it to you. Don't try to pull me close now just because you need something. She started crying, full on now, sobs echoing through the hallway. A nurse glanced over, then looked away. I stood there, stiff, unmoved. I didn't hug her, didn't offer comfort. I just walked away, my boots echoing on the tile floor. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at my hands. Hands that had built houses, fixed engines, wiped tears. Hands that had just given blood to a child I hadn't even met yet. I felt everything all at once. Anger, grief, guilt, even shame. Not because I'd said what I said, but because it had come to this. My daughter had tossed me aside like a broken tool, and now she wanted me to forget it all because she suddenly remembered I was useful. 2 days later, my neighbor Paul came by again. He'd heard. News travels fast. You went through with it? He asked, surprised. I nodded. He squinted at me. You better than me. I would have let them sweat. I didn't answer right away. I looked at the bottle in his hand, the small brown paper bag holding a loaf of bread, and then finally at him. I didn't do it for her, I said. I did it for the baby. She's blameless. Paul shook his head. Still, that girl owes you more than an apology. I looked out the window. The sky was gray. Heavy. She owes me a whole lifetime back, I muttered. 3 nights after the hospital, I was lying on the couch in the living room with the TV flickering silently in the background. The sound was off, but I left the images running anyway. Something about the motion kept my mind from folding in on itself. I hadn't returned to the garage. The radio was still broken. The baby clothes were still in the box by the door. Everything in my house had started to feel frozen, like time had taken one look at the way my life fell apart and decided to stop out of respect. Then the phone rang again. It was late, almost 11 p.m., and I almost didn't answer. I stared at the screen. Same number, same name, but this time I waited. Let it ring until the last second before I picked up. Hello. There was silence on the other end at first, then a sniff. Her voice was soft. She's okay now. The doctors say she'll be fine. I closed my eyes. Relief hit me in a slow, quiet wave. Not joy, not happiness, just relief. Like a held breath I hadn't realized I was keeping had finally been released. That's good, I said. I wanted you to know. I nodded, though she couldn't see me. All right. More silence. Then she whispered, Daddy, can we talk? My hand gripped the phone tighter. My throat felt tight, too, like something was pushing against it from the inside. I don't know what you expect me to say, I replied. She exhaled shakily. I feel like I ruined everything. You didn't ruin it, I said quietly. You ended it. I could hear her breathing, ragged, tired. I imagined her curled up in some big white bed in that expensive house, clutching her phone like a lifeline. Maybe her husband was asleep beside her. Maybe not. I didn't care. I know what I said was unforgivable, she murmured. I've been thinking about it every day. I don't even know why I said it like that. I was scared. I thought. She paused. I thought you'd embarrass me. Those words hit different. Not because they were new, but because they were honest. I stood up, started pacing slowly across the room. You thought I'd embarrass you? She didn't respond. But the silence was enough. I swallowed hard. So all these years, the sacrifices, the late nights, the bruised hands, the loan sharks I kept at bay so you could go to school. None of that meant anything? All you saw when you looked at me was poverty? No, she cried. It's not that. It's just, I married into this world that's so different. They're so judgmental, Daddy. You have no idea how they look at me, how they looked at you when they saw that old photo I had in my phone. I was afraid they'd use you to make me feel small. I barked out a bitter laugh. So you made me feel small first. Beat them to it, huh? I didn't mean, don't, I snapped. Don't lie to me now. You meant every word. You called me poor like it was a curse. Like being your father was an infection you needed to keep out of your shiny new life. She was quiet again. And then, finally, she whispered, I know I don't deserve forgiveness. No, you don't, I said. That silence stretched for what felt like minutes. She didn't argue, didn't beg. She just sat with it. I think, in that moment, she realized something she hadn't before, realized that not all wounds close just because you're sorry. Some stay open, because the apology comes too late or the pain runs too deep. Eventually, I said, I won't stop you from healing. I won't poison the air between us. But don't expect the old me to come walking through your door. Can I at least come see you? She asked. I hesitated. Thought about it. About how that might look. About whether it would help or hurt. Then I said, maybe. Not today. Maybe not this month. Okay, she whispered. I'll wait. I hung up not long after. Didn't say goodbye. Didn't promise anything. Just ended the call. Later that week, I was back at the shop when Paul dropped by again, oil stain on his sleeve and that same skeptical look on his face. He leaned against the open garage door and said, So? You talked to her again? I nodded. And? She apologized. Paul snorted. And you just let her off the hook like that? I shook my head. No. I let her speak. That's all. He watched me for a while. You sure you're not just soft for her? I'm soft for the truth, I said. And the truth is, I was nothing but good to that girl. If she wants me back in her life, she's going to have to earn that. Paul grunted. She won't. Maybe not, I replied. But that's her burden now, not mine. He left after that, but his words stayed behind like smoke in the air. You sure you're not just soft for her? The answer haunted me for days. Maybe I was. Maybe a part of me still longed for my little girl to come back. Not the woman who spit venom over the phone, but the child who used to hold my pinky finger as we crossed the road. But longing isn't the same as trust. And love, I was learning, could survive without reconciliation. Sometimes love just sits there quietly, in the wreckage of what used to be. I didn't expect the letter. It arrived on a Wednesday morning, tucked beneath my front door in an envelope so clean and cream-colored it looked foreign in my dusty, weathered home. I stared at it for a long while before opening it. Her handwriting hadn't changed much since she was a teenager, round, careful, like she was always trying to impress someone. And yet, there was nothing graceful about what was inside. It was all apologies. Page after page of guilt, carefully woven into sentences that tiptoed around real accountability. She wrote that she didn't know what came over her, that the hormones and pressure had cracked her spirit, made her lash out at the one person who had never let her down. She said she missed me, that she wanted her daughter, my granddaughter, to grow up knowing the man who raised her mother alone, who taught her to ride a bike, who stitched together a childhood out of grit and grace. And then, tucked at the bottom like a whispered afterthought, she wrote, If you want, you can meet her now. You deserve that. My hands trembled as I folded the letter back into its envelope. I wanted to burn it, toss it, bury it beneath the kitchen sink. But I didn't. I placed it on the mantel beside the photo of her mother and walked away. 3 days later, I got another call, this time from the hospital administrator. Apparently, they'd sent a letter of appreciation and wanted to inform me that the baby had stabilized and was being discharged. No mention of the mother. No gratitude. Just cold logistics. That call sealed it for me. Whatever bond had once existed between father and daughter had become transactional, and I'd paid my due, in blood. But despite everything, I couldn't ignore the pull in my chest. The ache to see her, not my daughter, but the baby. The one who hadn't said those words, who hadn't judged my boots or my salary or the grease beneath my nails. So I called a nurse friend I knew who worked night shifts at that hospital. Her name was Remy. We hadn't spoken in months, but she answered quickly. You're the grandfather? She asked gently after I explained. I suppose I am, I said. Can you tell me, how is she? The baby. Remy paused. She's strong. Beautiful. A fighter. You saved her life, you know. I know, I said softly. She has your eyes. I had to sit down. My knees couldn't hold me. Will she ever know it was me? I asked. That depends, Remy said quietly, on whether you want to be known. That night, I dreamt of her, small, wrapped in a pink blanket, blinking up at me. In the dream, she didn't cry. She just looked. And in her eyes, there was no judgment, only wonder. When I woke, my cheeks were wet. The next Sunday, I decided to go to church. It had been months, maybe years. The building hadn't changed. Same cracked ceiling, same familiar hymns, but I felt different, like a man who had given something that could never be returned. During the sermon, the pastor spoke about forgiveness, about how love without truth was hollow, and truth without love was cruelty. The words sit heavy on my chest. After the service, a woman I hadn't seen in years came up to me, Mrs. Okoye. She looked at me with pity and curiosity all blended together. I heard what happened, she said, leaning in as if sharing a secret. She really said all that? After all you did for her? I nodded once. She did. And you still gave your blood? I looked her in the eyes. She's still my granddaughter. Innocent. Mrs. Okoye's lips tightened. You're a better person than me. I would have let that child rot just to teach the mother a lesson. I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. That's the difference between revenge and responsibility. Her comment followed me home, echoed through my kitchen while I washed dishes, mocked me as I swept the porch. Would I have been justified to walk away? To ignore that late-night call and let the in-laws scramble for another match? Probably. But I knew the regret would have eaten me alive. Because deep down, I'd still have heard my daughter's voice as a toddler, running to me with scraped knees, calling me daddy like it was the safest word in the world. Later that week, she showed up. I was on the porch, sharpening a blade for the machete I used to trim the weeds behind the house. Her car pulled up slowly, unfamiliar and glossy. I didn't stand. I kept working. She stepped out, holding the baby in her arms, wrapped in that same pink blanket from my dream. Her husband wasn't with her. Hi, she said. I didn't answer. She looked down at the baby. This is Amara. I didn't move, didn't speak, just stared at her. She's healthy now. Thanks to you. Still, I said nothing. I know I don't deserve this moment, but I wanted you to meet her. Just once. I finally stood, walked slowly down the porch steps. I looked at the baby. She was sleeping, breathing softly, so unaware of all the mess that preceded her. She has your forehead, my daughter said, forcing a small laugh. And that same serious look you used to get when I was in trouble. I looked up at her, tired of the performance. Why are you really here? She swallowed. Because I miss my father. And because I want my daughter to have a grandfather. You should have thought about that before you called me poor, I said, my voice low. I know, she whispered. And I'm sorry. I shook my head. You don't get to walk back in because you need me again. I gave you what no one else could. And that doesn't come with a ticket to forgiveness. Tears spilled over her cheeks. She didn't wipe them, just nodded. I looked down at the baby one last time. She's lucky to have survived, to have a clean slate. Then I turned and walked back up the steps. The first person to call was my sister. She'd been quiet through the whole ordeal, saying nothing when the story first broke, if she even knew at all. But apparently, news of the confrontation on my porch had reached her through someone's long-winded retelling. She didn't waste time with pleasantries. You mean to tell me you turned her away? She snapped. After everything? You wouldn't even hold the baby? I was sitting on my back steps, watching the chickens scratch through the dirt, phone pressed against my ear. I didn't bother defending myself. She didn't come for peace, I said. She came to soothe her own guilt. My sister exhaled sharply, the kind of sound she used to make when we were kids, and I beat her at something she didn't expect to lose. You're still hurt. I get it. But this pride of yours, it's gonna eat you alive. That baby is your blood. I know what she is, I said, sharper than I meant to. I gave her blood, remember? Silence followed. A long one. She's just a child, my sister said finally, voice lower now. She doesn't know about any of this mess. One day she'll ask why you were never around. What will you tell her? I'll tell her the truth, I said. That I was pushed out by her mother. That I was called a burden and shut out of their world until they needed a donor. And then I'll let her decide what kind of man I was. My sister didn't argue again. She just said, suit yourself, and hung up. The next day, a neighbor knocked on my door, Mama Ease, the kind of woman who wore gossip like perfume. She came bearing a covered dish and questions disguised as sympathy. We're all just shocked, she said as I opened the door. We heard what she said to you. Nah, man, if my daughter said that to me, I'd curse the ground she walks on. I didn't invite her in. I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. I don't need a crowd cheering for my pain. She blinked. I'm just saying, people are talking. Some are even saying she's ungrateful. That it's a disgrace. Your name's been in people's mouths like soup. Let them talk, I said. It's better than being forgotten. She gave me a look I couldn't quite read, part pity, part admiration, and then placed the dish in my hands. Fried yam and stew. Eat something. She left before I could say thank you. I watched her disappear down the path, her wrapper swishing as she walked, and for the first time in weeks, I felt something close to dignity. I wasn't alone in this. even if the house felt emptier than it used to. But not all the reactions were so gentle. At the mechanic shop, two of the younger boys started whispering when I walked in. I heard snippets, "Imagine your own daughter calling you poor," and me, I disowned her too. They shut up when I glared at them, but the damage was done. I could feel it, the way people now looked at me not as just the quiet widower with a hard-working past, but as a man whose own blood had rejected him. Even Paul, my loudmouth neighbor who always had something to say, started treading carefully. "You really not going to talk to her again?" he asked one evening while we sat on the porch. "She made her choice," I said. He sipped his beer, then gave me a look. "And what happens if she comes back again? With that baby walking this time, calling you grandpa?" I didn't answer right away. My chest tightened just thinking about it. That small voice calling me something I wasn't sure I had the right to be anymore. Paul leaned forward. "You ever think maybe she just panicked? Said something she couldn't take back? Lord knows we've all said things we regret." "I didn't need an apology," I replied. "I needed respect. And that's not something you forget to give. It's something you choose not to." He sat back, let the silence fill the space between us. Then he said, "Damn, you really are done with her." I didn't respond. Not because I was sure, but because I wasn't. The truth is, I thought about her every day. Not just the woman she'd become, but the girl she used to be. The one who ran into my arms after school, who sat beside me in the garage while I fixed things, asking questions I barely had answers to. I missed that child like a phantom limb. And every time I remembered her, I wondered if maybe there was still something left of her in the woman who stood on my porch. But then I remembered the look in her eyes that day at the hospital, the way she avoided mine, how her husband acted like I was a hired hand instead of the man who'd built the foundation under her feet. And I felt the door in my heart close all over again. Let people talk. Let them post their cryptic little quotes online about family and forgiveness. Let them say I was bitter, stubborn, cold. Let them say I held a grudge. Because in the end, I knew the truth. I hadn't abandoned anyone. I'd shown up when it mattered most. I'd done what no one else could. And that was enough. A month passed without another word from her. No calls. No texts. Not even a knock on the door. At first, I checked my phone more often than I'd admit, waking up in the middle of the night to glance at the screen, half hoping, half dreading another apology, another plea. But after a while, the silence settled in like furniture. I stopped expecting anything from her. It was almost a relief. Not having to rehearse what I'd say. Not having to guard my heart every time it buzzed. The baby, I heard through Remy, was thriving. Eating well. Gaining weight. Smiling now. I found myself imagining those tiny milestones, wondering if she looked like me or her mother. Whether she had that stubborn squint I used to wear when I was younger. Remy offered to bring a photo once, said she could accidentally leave it on my kitchen table. I told her not to. If I saw the baby's face, I might forget all the pain that came before her. And I wasn't sure I wanted to forget. Some wounds need to stay visible. Still, one afternoon, I found myself standing outside the supermarket, staring at a rack of baby clothes near the entrance. Pink dresses, small socks, little beanies with cartoon animals stitched on them. My fingers hovered over a soft pair of mittens. I picked them up, turned them over, then placed them in my cart. I told myself they were for a neighbor's newborn. But I knew better. We both did. When I got home, I packed the mittens in a small brown envelope. No note. No name. Just the mittens. Then I took a walk. Past the market, past the bus stop, all the way to the estate where her in-laws lived. I knew the gate. Knew the number. I slipped the envelope into their mailbox and walked away. I didn't do it to reopen the door. I did it to remind myself that love, even fractured, doesn't always disappear. Sometimes it just changes form, becomes quieter, becomes choice. A week later, Paul came by again, this time with a smirk that told me he had something to say before he even opened his mouth. "Your daughter posted something," he said, sitting on the edge of my porch. Picture of the baby. Caption said, "Thank you to the person who gave her life twice. You know who you are." I didn't ask to see it. I didn't need to. I just nodded. He looked at me carefully. "You feel anything reading that?" "Yeah," I said. I felt tired. He laughed, not because it was funny, but because he understood. There's a special kind of exhaustion that comes with emotional restraint, with building walls and sticking to them. People think walking away is easy. that staying gone means you don't care. But the truth is, it costs you something. Every day. Later that evening, I went into the garage and finally fixed the damn radio. Took it apart, cleaned the wires, soldered a new switch. When I turned it on, the static gave way to soft music, an old love song I hadn't heard in years. I let it play while I stood in the middle of the room, surrounded by tools and memories. And I thought about how far I'd come, about the boy I used to be. The one who fell in love too young, who buried a wife too soon, who raised a child on hand-me-downs and God's mercy. I thought about the man I became, patient, firm, maybe a little hard around the edges, but still standing, still giving, even when it cost me pieces of myself. She'd made her choices, and so had I. I saved a life. That was my final gift, my last offering, not to be repaid, not to earn back love, just because it was right. The rest? That was hers to carry. I went back to my chair on the porch and poured myself a glass of palm wine. The sky was turning orange, the sun dipping low. In the distance, kids laughed, chased each other with sticks and bare feet, unbothered by the weight of adulthood. I watched them for a while, then closed my eyes. I'd given everything I could, and I was done reaching. If you've ever had to walk away from someone you loved because they crossed a line you couldn't uncross, then you understand this story. Sometimes blood isn't enough to hold a family together, but self-respect always is. If this resonated with you, share your thoughts in the comments and let us know. Have you ever had to choose peace over connection? See you soon in the next story.